Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to our series on the Rambam's 13 Principles of Faith. I'm here with my cousin Michael Kalati, and today, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to be doing the final principle, principle number 13, which is the one that deals with Tzachiyat HaMeitim, the resurrection of the dead. And of course, we dedicate this episode, as we have every episode so far, in memory of Leah Bat Mazal Tov and Yoel Avraham ben Nisim Vitzivia. Okay, so I'm quoting from the Rambam on Mishnah Sanhedrin, which is the 10th Perek of Gemara Sanhedrin, the Mishnah there, which, as we know, Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelak Baba. So says the Rambam, the 13th principle is the revival of the dead, and it is as we've already elucidated it. And when a person believes in it, in all of these principles, and his faith in them is clarified, he enters into the category of Israel. And it is then a commandment to love him and to have mercy upon him and to act with him according to everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded about a man towards his fellow, regarding love and brotherhood. And even if he does what is in his ability from the sins, in other words, if he commits sins because of desire and overpowering of his Yetzer Hara, his base nature, he is punished according to his sins, but he still has a share in the world to come, and is only considered to be from the sinners of Israel. Only, of course, it's not a good thing, but it's not as bad as not having a share in Oravah, God forbid. Continues the Rambam, but if one of these principles, this is extremely important, this is really the crux of the entire series. Okay, so listen up here. But if even one of these principles becomes compromised for a person, behold, he exits the category of Israel. You hear that? He's no longer Bnei Israel, and denies a fundamental dogma, and he's called an apostate, a heretic, and somebody who cuts the plantings. So he's like a apikores, a mumar, whatever you want to call him. Now listen to this. Rambam's not pulling any punches here. And it is a commandment to hate him and to destroy him. And about him it is said in Tehillim 139 verse 21, quote, "Do I not hate those that hate you, O Lord?" End quote. And continues the Rambam, and behold, I have written at great length about these things, and I have gone on a tangent from the subject of my composition, but I have done this because I saw an important point to it about faith, as I have collected many useful things scattered in various great Sfarim, great books. And you should know them and have success in them, and review these things over and again many times, and reflect on them with a proper reflection. And if your heart carries you away to think that you understand its content from one, like a mere one reading, or even from 10, you will know that it has carried you away falsely. And therefore do not haste in your reading of it, since I did not write it according to that which just came to me, but rather after great analysis and reflection, and after I saw clear and true opinions, and also those not true, then I knew what was fitting to believe from them, and brought proof in the claims and proof to on each and every matter. And it is from Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to fulfill my wish and to guide me in the good path. And I will now return to the subject of the chapter in the Mishnah. Okay, I'll hand you over to Michael.
Thank you, Rabbi Sheikh. So in this final principle, Rambam offers the idea of resurrection, the idea that one day the dead will live again. This reaffirms that death is not the end, and that even our bodies, not only just our souls, have some sort of eternal value and are deserving of salvation. The same body that served us so well through life and helped us to perform mitzvot is not forgotten. So, where does Rambam speak about this? In Mishnah Torah, he in Hilchot Malachim, I believe he writes about this, but he writes about the Mashiach. But the controversy was that he didn't dwell on the resurrection side of messianic times. And we spoke about this in the 12th principle episode, where the Rambam was forced to write, or he chose to write, a kind of a treatise called Ma'amar Techiyat HaMesim, which was a treatise on the resurrection of the dead, where he firmly reaffirms what he meant. And it led to a bit of controversy. So let's look for some biblical sources for the idea of this, that Techiyas HaMesim was resurrection of the dead.
Bearing in mind, I should preface this, if you don't mind, by saying that there is no direct reference to Techiyas HaMesim in the Torah. All of these are like insinuations, like so.
Isaiah prophet said 26:19, your dead shall live and their corpses shall rise. Hosea 6:2, a quote, after 2 days Hashem will revive us. On the third day he will raise us up and we shall live in his presence.
Sorry, when I said the Torah, I meant the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses.
Okay, yeah.
This is the Nevi'im.
Yeah. In Job 19:25, I quote, I know that my Redeemer lives, and after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God. And from the Tehillim is also filled with this sort of language, and I quote, you have made me see many troubles and will revive me again. Like you say, they are kind of insinuations rather than direct references in the Torah. Daniel 12:2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, and various other ones. In Sanhedrin, in the Talmud, Sanhedrin 90 is a central text for Techiyas HaMesim. Rabbi Eliezer cites the Song of Moses as a proof text, and I quote from it. See now that I am he, and there is no God with me. I put to death and I bring to life. So the Rambam maintains that anybody who denies resurrection has, like you said, has no share in the world to come. Sadir Gaon argues that resurrection is rationally necessary. So the ultimate reward has to include the body as well as the soul, because the body is where all the good deeds were performed. Although Rambam, Maimonides, whilst affirming resurrection, still maintained very strongly that the idea of the Olam Haba is spiritual, with the soul like gaining closeness to Hashem. Ramban, he has a balance of both. He states that a spiritual paradise follows our physical existence, and the body and soul are reunited in holiness. If we look at the Kabbalistic view on this resurrection of the dead, it is viewed in Kabbalistic terms as the final stage in the soul's tikkun, its correction. Through a Gilgul or reincarnation, souls are refined and this resurrection restores them. The Zohar considers the resurrection as Techiyas HaMesim, as the final tikkun, the final repair of the world. The Arizal teaches that each body a soul has ever lived in or inhabited will be raised. And the Baal Shem Tov emphasized that the death is only a veil and the soul continues its mission. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said, and I quote, There is no despair in the world at all, not even in the grave. So it gives us hope for this resurrection as a natural result of a life lived, especially if you lived it in holiness. So why does this Tchias HaMesim matter? It's perhaps to give us an indication of the goodness of the body. You know, we sometimes we look at our essence as being the soul, which is absolutely correct, but the shell that we live in that helps us to perform all of the mitzvot and deserves some credit as well, and perhaps is worthy of salvation. So this the Tchias HaMesim underscores that our physical actions do matter, perhaps outside of our ken or our knowledge, and they're not just discarded. But again, Rambam was accused of downplaying it. Again, he had to write that treatise, but it still remains a foundational belief in our prayers as well. In the Amidah, we talk about Tchias HaMesim in the opening section. It's very important. But irregardless of whatever you think, whatever is your ultimate understanding, even if you say that Tchias HaMesim is about, we should feel spiritually dead if we're not as close as we should be to God. So even if you imagine that the opening verses of the Amidah relate to just your ethical closeness to God, it should urge you to rise from the dead in a spiritual way. Absolutely. You become alive when you return to God, even in this world, is what I'm trying to say.
That's beautiful.
So, also in Talmud Sanhedrin, that the commentary comes from, Rav Gamliel argues that Hashem, who creates life from nothing, can certainly revive the dead from something. You see, we're looking, sometimes perhaps we can have these kind of, it's hard for us to imagine that something can return from the dead in our in our physical existence. But truth be told, if God can do anything, why can't he revive the dead? That's what Rav Gamliel says in Sanhedrin 90 Omid Base. Sota 13b describes the resurrection of the 12 tribes as essential to redemption. Midrash Tehillim 14 states that you have an advantage if you are buried in Israel, as that's where the first to rise in the resurrection will come from Israel.
That's why, by the way, Yaakov Avinu wanted to be reinterred. He wanted to be buried in Israel. So he wanted Yosef to take his bones to Israel, because he was worried if he'd be buried outside of Israel, his bones would have to roll through. The idea that the bones at Tchias HaMesim roll through these underground tunnels and they get to Jerusalem. It's very painful for the body to undergo this process. So, I mean, if Yaakov Avinu was worried about that, and he was, he's the Bechirsha Ba'avot. He's the chosen, like the point that the chosen one of the forefathers. How much more so we should also be concerned to be. We should also have our last days in Israel.
Yes, very true. So let's now look at the some clarifications from Maimonides. This was a very serious thing that happened, where because he didn't overstate or state clearly or with enough emphasis the idea of resurrection of the dead being a physical event, it forced him to bring out the, I think it's also Igeret Teiman as well, but also the Mama Tchias HaMesim. But let's look at a little bit in more detail at his philosophy of Tchias HaMesim. So he looked as resurrection as a real event, but he differentiated between Olam Haba, which is eternal reward for the soul, which is a spiritual, non-corporeal event, and Tchias HaMesim. He considered Tchias HaMesim to be a temporary stage where the body is revived, but in a process, a much bigger process. He insisted in this treatise on Tchias HaMesim that Rambam insisted he never denied resurrection, but he only emphasized the primacy of the soul, which is correct, because if we look at our essence truly is our soul.
Yeah.
So I can understand, his angle on this. So perhaps we'd look at the idea of the Baal Shem Tov described death as not a disappearance, but only a transition. He stated that the righteous continue to influence the world, even from beyond, even in concealment, so to speak. Rav Nachman, I quote Rav Nachman, never give up hope. Even in the grave, there is a path of return. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke of resurrection not as an end of days event, but a concept that teaches us how to revive what feels spiritually dead in our lives right now. That's so important. That's very Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's so true. Before we think about the ends, correct yourselves here, correct ourselves here, so that we have the best chance of all chances. We have the best chance. It's quite a complex subject, but let's look at in a scientific way. How do we understand resurrection? What are the views of Rambam and Sajja Gaon regarded the fact that Hashem is able to do anything. He designed life once, so he can also renew it, whether they falls in line with the laws of science or not. That was their opinion. So let's reflect finally what this idea of resurrection, what does it teach us? It gives us hope of life after death. It teaches us that the physical state matters. Perhaps, appreciate the fact that we can perform mitzvot, and it gives us extra kind of oomph when we perform mitzvot to appreciate that our physical states do matter, and it's not just a shell. This is giving us the ability to make us worthy of Olam Haba. So, there is something exceptionally holy about the body. So we should appreciate that, and nothing that is lost, like our ancestors, is never really lost forever, and we can expect a return. And basically, that's the 13th principle.
Oh wow! Okay, so I guess that wraps it up for the entire series. Okay, I'd like to thank Michael. I hope you have enjoyed this series as much as we have presenting it and creating it. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back at some stage with something else.
Another series
on something else, hopefully not too far in the distant future. And until then, Baruch Adonai L'Olam, Amen. Amen.